The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the show. The West Stand is our new show this season. It's out on a Monday and Friday. It's available on YouTube and in your podcast app, where we welcome guests from across the world of Leeds United and football. My name's Dan Moylan. With me is Michael Normanton.
All right.
Black Friday's getting closer. You excited?
Always, yeah. Not slept. Just thinking about all the bargains to be had.
Is there one bargain in particular that stands out to you, maybe from a VPN provider? NordVPN is the one I'm thinking of.
I was just thinking of as well. Yeah. It's because they sponsor the show, that's why.
Yeah. Why should someone get NordVPN then?
Well, you've seen all these fixture changes. NordVPN, you can just go to a country where it's a better time for you and watch it there. It'd be much better for you. International travel. Is that how it works?
I believe so.
I'm thinking of time machines. No,
so it's as good as that.
It's as good as.
It
right.
is as good as that. But yeah, you can watch sporting events, TV shows, movies, that sort of thing that are not available in your region by switching virtual location. Very clever, isn't it?
It is.
You can protect your private data. So if you're doing your online banking or something like that, protect your passwords, just your overall online identity will be looked after. And also, there's the bit you'll like. You can save money on flights, hotels, subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, which I know you've availed yourself of in the past.
I've been known to.
Yeah, I was already a paying customer of NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world, baby.
Meow.
If you want to get the exclusive Black Friday discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/TSB. That link will give you an additional 4 months on top of your discounted 2-year plan, risk-free as well. Nord offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. nordvpn.com/TSB. You'll find a link in the episode description box. And now we will welcome our guest as well from Not the Top 20.
Morally, we are top 20, but table's laying.
We've got delusions of top 20 anyway, until we get back there. Yeah, Ali Maxwell from Not the Top 20 podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hello, gents.
Thanks for coming back on and injecting a little bit of sanity into proceedings when we start losing our mind only weeks into the season. Another international break then, Ali. And we're here to talk about the championship overall and a little bit about the feeling at Ellen Road. And it's shifted a little bit since I think we last spoke. Would you agree, Michael, that it's some of the joy's been sucked out of it in recent weeks, I think, and I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it's just the circumstances we find ourselves in and the fact that teams are coming to Ellen Road and not even trying to score, let alone win, even when they're behind.
It's partially Millwall's fault, let's be honest.
Right.
If we'd have won that game, I think people would generally be much happier. But there's a little bit of angst still around the fact we've lost a game. But yeah, it is. The games are quite dull at Ellen Road is the problem, because I think this is 2 home games in a row now where the opposition have not registered a shot on target. It's quite low jeopardy on both sides. It feels like, both from the way we approach it and the way opponents approach it.
What do you make of what you've seen from Leeds in recent weeks? Did you watch the Millwall game?
I didn't watch the Millwall game live. I watched back as much of it as I could in terms of the extended highlights. I saw a few set-piece opportunities for them, one of which was taken, one of which was headed onto the post, wasn't it, by a Leeds player? And I saw a few Leeds opportunities, particularly in the first half, that one brilliant block that they had. I think it was Gnonto with a chance. Aronson maybe with another one, or maybe that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah, I think that Millwall team's the best Millwall team that we've covered for sure. And I always think it's important, we do the England pod as well. And so if I'm thinking about creating content about one individual team, I personally think it's really important to understand the context of your opposition as well. So from a Leeds point of view, I definitely wanted to make the point that Millwall team are pretty good, and in particular, pretty good at defending, particularly at home. And in particular, pretty good at generating chances from set pieces. And so I don't feel like losing 1-0 away at Millwall was a massive red flag or a big issue. I'm kind of chuckling to myself that you guys both agree that something's not quite right, but that you don't necessarily agree on the symptoms of it. And Dan suggesting that the home games are too easy. Michael, that it was the away defeat that's caused a bit of a stink. It's a really interesting scenario from an outsider. I'll put it that way to start with. Essentially, it feels to me like we're talking about a team, your team, one of 72 that we cover, for whom the football's a bit easy at the moment. And I can guarantee you that isn't the case for the other 71 teams. So from that point of view, I think this is quite an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, it's funny you should sort of point out the silliness of some of it, in that we're a bit pissed off about the away defeat at Millwall. We found the home games too easy. I suppose we're just looking for sort of a Goldilocks spot somewhere in the middle. And I think Rob, our colleague Rob, tweeted something to the effect of the Championship. Actually, if anyone ever tells me the Championship is more fun than the Premier League, they're wrong. And I realised actually it encapsulates it quite well. I think a little bit of the fun has been sucked out of it in recent weeks, because it is undoubtedly fun when you're winning. Losing is not fun, but when you're winning and there's no jeopardy, that's not much fun either. And that's not to say that we're having a bad time. We've just not had a lot of fun with it. And you would think that winning would bring just unadulterated joy, but it's not the case, is it?
I mean, the Plymouth game was particularly strange because a 3-0 home win is generally a great weekend. Everyone goes out into Leeds, great time afterwards. There's just pure celebration for it. But actually, the second half was so weird. The game finished and everyone just sort of went, cool. All right, well, that's enough of that then. See you later. See you later. We sort of came back in here without any kind of adrenaline pumping because it had been a half of football unlike probably anything I've ever seen.
So you won. I'm going to be a bit facetious and play a bit of devil's advocate, but you've won your last 4 or 5 home games. You've only conceded 1 goal in that. Do you think it would feel better, by which I mean maybe more fun, if instead of 2-0, 2-1, 3-0 and 2-0, you'd won 3-1, 4-2, 4-1 and 3-1? Like, you want to win the games. Let's be clear about that. You just want to face a few more shots. So it feels like you've earned it. Like, this is 2-pronged for me. This is about the quality of the Championship as a whole and some of the teams that are coming to Ellen Road. But it's mainly about Leeds being a really, really, really strong football team that since the start of last season has exerted a level of dominance over their opposition at home to the point where teams don't feel like they can come and play their natural game and feel like the best way to get a point, which would represent an incredible result, is to sit in, try and frustrate Leeds United. The last time I was on, we talked about the end of last season, where frustrating Leeds United wasn't that difficult by putting men behind the ball. If you could stop Somerville and Ruter from doing bits of individual quality, it worked quite well. And Leeds' ability to chase games in the last half an hour was something that we were questioning. Farke's subs, Farke's tactics. That at that point, it felt like going to Ellen Road and playing that sort of way was an effective way of getting a point. This season, that hasn't been the case. So to me, there's some credit that should go to Farke and Leeds and this squad of players. I think they've, in some ways, seemed to have got better, or at least have improved on some of the things that were tripping them up towards the end of last season. You're just a really good team, especially at Ellen Road. Your XG difference per 90 is over 1 expected goal. And that is seriously nerdy. But what it means is you're basically a goal better than your opposition per match, which in football terms is massive. It's a low scoring sport, right? 2.5 goals a game, let's say on average. If you're a goal better on average than your opposition every single game, Man City and Liverpool's numbers aren't as impressive as that. They are below that 1 XG per 90 mark in the Premier League at the moment. So essentially, just in terms of the quality of the chances that you're having and giving up to the opposition, at the moment you're projecting as a stronger team in the Championship than Liverpool and Man City are in the Premier League. So it's kind of a question of what you want as a fan, right? Like, do Man City fans enjoy watching their team play in the Premier League? Bad time to ask the question. They've lost 4 games in a row for the first time in 7 years. But more generally, over the last few years, are they still buzzing at winning 3-0 against Palace without facing a shot on target? Because this is basically the main question. It's about expectation. It's about what excites you as a fan. And on a qualitative level, it's about having a really good team.
Yeah.
And being able to sort of have issues with that.
Yeah, with the Man City example, I actually used that in some of our analysis because I had been over there for a couple of their Champions League games, and the dead rubber ones in particular are really, really flat. And I wonder if that extends into a lot of the Premier League games where there's no jeopardy at the Etihad. And I think actually, having reflected on it since the QPR game, now this is coming out another sort of 5 or 6 days on from the time of recording, but it was fairly recent in the memory for us. I think it's just no more complicated than a lack of entertainment and fun. And that's all. And that can manifest itself in a number of ways, whether it's the style of play that sometimes gets on people's goat because it's so controlling and so risk averse. But actually, the lack of jeopardy on the other side of it, the lack of opposition teams attacking us also, I think, factors into it. We've just hit this kind of, I suppose it's a bit of a super recipe of factors that mean a lot of this is not fun, and it's not necessarily fun because we're second time around the track as well. And it's heighten the necessity to go up from a financial point of view. There's a lot of factors there, I think, that de-romanticize what we're trying to achieve. It feels quite functional, and the point of the championship really is you need to get out of it.
I think part of it is the time of the year as well, because it's, I think I mentioned on the match ball after the QPR game, that game, it didn't really have any tension in it because we were so dominant. They didn't have any chances. I think they had a shot that went over the bar at one point that it ended up bouncing on the roof of the net. Looked fairly close.
So is that the first chance? Is that the one chance we effectively, or near chance, that we conceded in 2 games of football at Ellen Road?
I think it pretty much is. But there was that's the sort of moment in the game, though, that if that's the final home game of the season and you know you need 4 points from your final 2 games and that sort of thing happens, it's quite a heart-stopping moment. But because it's November and with loads of games left, we're in a pretty decent position in the league, you can kind of just go, well, even if we draw it, it's kind of not the end of the world, is it? You need a bit of life and death sometimes in a football match to bring it to life. If there's otherwise not much of a competition
even
happening.
If you claim you would like to win 5-0 every week, I don't think you would, because as like say the Man City example proves it, and a little bit of this in recent weeks proves it at Ellen Road too. For to face a Plymouth side, it was that didn't even try to attack. It's one of the most bizarre football matches I've ever seen. That.
Yeah, so I guess 2 things I'd say off the back of that. One is the 2 opposition teams that you've played in the last 2 home games play a big factor in this, as much as Leeds' impressive controlling quality. Argyle came and played an absurd starting 11 with like 6 defenders, 3 midfielders, of which one was a teenager making his debut, one up top who obviously never touched the ball. They had absolutely no intent, and they pretty much chose an 11 that gave them even less chance of doing well in that game, partly because they had a big game at home to Portsmouth, which mattered more to them and gave them a more likely chance of picking up 3 points, and would be helped by them being a little bit fresher and having rotated in a busy week. They won that game 1-0. So from a Plymouth Argyle context, that was probably justified, even if it was very boring for you guys to watch.
It's as close as you're going to get.
Do nothing.
It's as close as you're going to
get.
Sorry, I was going to say it's as close as you can get to a team almost throwing a game. That.
Right. Well, I specifically haven't said that because I don't want to get in any trouble for suggesting anything of that nature. But I would definitely take the point. And QPR, massive injury issues. They've got a midfielder playing at centre back. They've got a terrible, they're missing their best player in Chair, who's the only one that can really create anything. Really low on confidence. They're playing poorly against every opposition at the moment. Both of those teams. Argyle away from home, one of the worst away teams I can remember covering in the Championship. So I think there's an aspect to this that is just the timing and the nature of the opposition in the last 2 games. Your next 3 at home, Luton, Derby and Borough, particularly against Luton and Borough, there will be ways in which they provide a much stronger, stiffer opposition and maybe give a little bit of that jeopardy that we're after.
Yeah, I think we're just hooked on danger. That's all it is. We've had so much emotional turmoil over the last couple of decades. We're adrenaline junkies, and when it's taken out of it, I think we start getting clucky. We need it.
That's what I was thinking. Actually, it's like I don't mean to take the piss, but I was like, do you guys actually just need Meslier to be a bit useless sometimes? Do you need, to use another example, do you need Patrick Bamford to score 12 goals from 20 XG? Like, do you kind of need that in order to just have something to talk about, I guess? Like, because at the moment, the players are all playing pretty well. The team's playing pretty well at home and winning games fairly comfortably, maybe not doing it with the amount of individual flair as you had last season with Ruter and Somerville, players to fall in love with. I don't know. You guys can tell me if any of the current crop have sort of caught the imagination and captured the hearts of the fans quite as much at this point. But the other thing I think is really important to say here, and maybe it's because I want you guys to be happier. You specifically and the Leeds fans.
Never.
I just think, like, bear in mind, you're not in the top two. You're not in the top two at the moment. So this isn't, you're not 5 points clear. You're not 6 points clear of third place. You've played, we're talking about the home games at the moment, and that's notable because you've had 4 in your last 6, 4 since the last international break, right? So that's what's freshest in your mind. But you've played 7 games this season against teams in the top 10, and you've only won 2 of those 7. There are other good teams, probably not as good in terms of controlling the game and territory and dominance and stats, etc. But Sunderland are good, and Sheffield United are good, and Burnley are good at defending. You know, Burnley have conceded 6 this season. Sheffield United have conceded 7 this season. Their fans aren't finding it particularly exciting, but the teams are good, like they're effective football teams. So, like, it's enough to keep you honest. You're talking about like, wow, it doesn't feel like winning matters as much in November as it does at the end of the season, but you're not in the top 2. So if Premier League promotion is as important as it clearly is for everyone, the club and for fans for different reasons, you like try and put your own jeopardy on these games. Like, you do need to win them. It's not, I know that George came on last time out and me the time before that and told you guys that Leeds were incredible and class, and here's all the reasons why you're the best team in the league. I believe in that, while at the same time wanting to say, like, you're not doing that well in terms of results. So you still need to win the games, and don't sniff at an easy win, because it won't always be.
No, I know. I wonder, what's your take on the overall state of the championship in terms of styles of play and physicality? And this was one of the things I think that caught us a little bit by surprise when we faced Sheffield United. Traditionally, Chris Wilder's teams have always given us a bit of a going over and try to leave one on and just let you know that they're there, that kind of thing. You know, the whole Yorkshire Derby aspect of it. We just did not get that. And we got another fairly defensive, borderline passive performance from them. They didn't really try and attack all that much. And he described us like as a different animal. And I wonder, is that symptomatic of the league as a whole? Is there less physicality now? And in particular, the referee against QPR was absolutely awful. Not in any particular one way, just blowing up for absolutely the tiniest infraction, any physical contact. And I wonder, is that just a quirk of referees, or is it something that's happening in the championship overall? It's becoming more technical and less physical, and that removes a certain amount of excitement from it as a product.
Yeah, possibly. I think what's interesting is that from my perspective, Sheffield United, in terms of the players that they have in their team, should be among the most physical teams in the league. In fact, I think that they are. That obviously wasn't your experience when they played against you guys at Ellen Road. But, you know, instinctively, when I think of the players in the division that stand out most on a physical level, outside of Leeds' players, it's probably Vinny D'Souza, who plays in midfield for them. He is the only real like midfield destroyer in the league at the moment, because a lot of teams prioritize technical ability in midfield. So you're right there. Football and the types of players that teams want in midfield. It's the same at the back, where the centre-backs are much less physical than maybe they would have been in a previous era. At the same time, you found out to your peril that Jake Cooper still exists, and he still wins pretty much every header that gets put into the box. So that's still there in Millwall's sense. I think the strikers, Kiefer Moore is a target man in theory. I think he struggled to have any impact against your lot. Strikers in general are generally in the championship. There actually is a bit of a uniform championship striker now. They're normally about 6'1", 6'2". You can't be small and weak and be a championship striker, but I would say it's more of an all-round athleticism than like a sort of pure muscle target man, like shoving defenders out of the way. And then again, to bring it back to Leeds, I think a problem here is you have the most physical team in the league in some ways, as well as being one of the strongest technical, like Strauch and Rodon as a centre-back pairing. The fact that they can both play, Strauch in particular, shouldn't take away from the fact that he wins almost every single aerial duel, and Rodon is very front-footed as well. In championship terms, these guys are as physical as it gets as centre-backs. In midfield, obviously Ampadu's injured at the moment, but he's up there with D'Souza in terms of what he brings in terms of ball winning ability and physicality in midfield. Obviously not quite so much up front, but again, you guys just have quite a strong group of players compared to the base level of the championship. And I think that's probably, it is true what you're suggesting. Your average championship team, not one's going for promotion, but one's trying to stay up. They're doing it in a different way now. They're not playing direct football, like playing with the ball in the air a lot. They're all trying to play some variation of like fairly expansive 4-3-3 with like dribbly, quick wide forwards and lots of turnovers, lots of transition. Like if you watch a game between, let's say, Stoke and Hull, who are 13th and 19th, if you watch a game between them, it probably looks very different to all of Leeds games at the moment because there's a bit more parity in terms of the quality of the players and there's a bit more intent from both teams to actually try and win points because they feel they can do that in those games more easily than they can at Ellen Road.
Yeah, I've watched some of the Championship games and noticed similar. They seem to be very different to our games just on the whole.
No, not everyone has Outanaka in midfield.
That's true. Outanaka is a generational talent, and we know that.
What have you made of him out of interest? Because I think if you said, is there anyone who's kind of replaced people like Ruter as someone for the crowd to love, and he's probably it. And weirdly, people have got strangely excited about Gili Vogie as well, even though he's come off the bench for like 2 minutes so far. I think people have just been excited by the presence of a large man coming on the pitch as much as anything.
A large man.
Yeah, I mean, Tanaka's been really fun, hasn't he? Just giving you exactly what you needed in midfield. I imagine that was a source of some concern when the previous two got injured. Your man Gruev and obviously Ampadu. So I think there's just such delight, I guess, to have someone slot in so brilliantly. Fantastic piece of recruitment for sure. Funny enough, we've got a community of EFL lovers called the NTT20 squad. Someone in the summer who's an Ipswich fan messaged to say we've just played a friendly against Fortuna Düsseldorf, and this guy called Ao Tanaka was unbelievable and is apparently available for 2.5 million. So there was an Ipswich fan that flagged him and said, I kind of hope we might buy this guy. And then he messaged again when Leeds signed to sort of remind us that he thought he was a quality player, and he clearly is. So yeah, I mean, it's all gone pretty well in terms of people stepping in for previous key players, both the ones that left in the summer and also the injuries this season. It's been amazing, really.
Just to return to the Goldilocks theory about what's going on at Leeds at the minute. Part of it is that everybody would agree with what you're saying, Ali, about what we know. I think the talent that we've got at our disposal and how good the squad is. And part of some of the dissatisfaction, I think it's just one of the ingredients in the soup, is thinking that we should actually be further ahead than we are, that we've slightly underperformed. And, well, mind you, barring the Melier error at Sunderland, we know we would have been, I think, top going into this break or thereabouts. So, yeah, there's a little bit of that as well. It's a strange mix of factors that are quite hard to nail down. I think as a single thing. Anyway, you can't necessarily identify a single source of any slight grumbles. But football fans, I think we have to accept, we're never happy as a bunch of as a breed of people, are we?
Burnley fans seem particularly unhappy. For one of our other shows we do, where we listen to clips from other fans, I've been listening to some Burnley fans last night. And even though they won, they are really unhappy. Like they were Burnley fans saying they should have sacked him after that win on the weekend because they're so sick of Scott Parker.
So it's not just us.
It's definitely no. There was another discussion in NT20 squad this week actually, where someone who doesn't support a championship team was like, "Is it me or are all the fans of championship clubs really miserable this season? Even the ones in the top six?" And it was agreed that for somewhat unique reasons to do with various different aspects of fandom and football, pretty much everyone's pretty unhappy. Watford fans having quite a good time at the moment, but also kind of with this spectre looming that they're probably not quite as good as their results suggest. So they probably will drop down the table, and actually those issues that they have with the owners will probably start becoming more important if the results do drop off.
For a brief period, admittedly, Watford looked like the best team we've faced this season.
Yeah.
The start of the second half, they properly got at us, and we were on the ropes for 20 minutes of that game, which has not happened in any others. So it showed that they have got something when they want to. They obviously gifted us a 2-0 lead, which was very kind of them. My suggestion to anyone that's not enjoying going to Ellen Road at the moment, I think talking it through has provided a pretty good idea of the different ingredients going into this slightly tedious cocktail or unhappy cocktail, is enjoy the away games. You've only won 2 of those out of 7. So if you want jeopardy, you want the games not to be quite as easy as they are at Ellen Road, put a lot into the away games. And maybe, if it's
a different type of football that you want to watch because you're not enjoying what the current championship is serving up. Maybe it's Farsley Celtic on Saturdays when Leeds are playing at home.
Just looking through the away games, actually, like West Brom, the 0-0, there was a little bit of dissatisfaction around the lack of ambition there, although there were transfer window factors still at play.
And we were coming off the back of selling Ruter and getting trounced by Middlesbrough in the Cup. So that felt a little bit like Farke just stemming the bleeding for a week. Just be like, let's just get a point here. And a point at West Brom is a decent point as well.
And then we went to Sheffield Wednesday and turned them over comfortably. We won comfortably at Cardiff. The point at Norwich actually was probably fine in the shakedown, and we should have won at Sunderland, barring that error, the last minute. There's a little bit of annoyance at the lack of ambition at Bristol, and then we've lost at Millwall. So yeah, you mean we've got Swansea coming up. Well, I mean, what do you make of them? What have we got to look forward to when we return after the break, Ali? When we go to Swansea, what have you got on Swansea?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of style of play, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy this one much because they are, I think, the only team that basically play more passes than you guys in the league. Partly for them, it's a defensive ploy because they're not particularly strong defensively. So the idea is if they have the ball, then they're not going to be under too much pressure from the opposition. So I guess in that sense, it actually might be interesting for Leeds to come up against a team who, they will try and dominate possession. So in terms of watching a game that looks a bit different to some of your games recently, I think you should have that at Swans. They're not particularly dynamic in the final third. So if Leeds defend as they have done all season, it's difficult for me to imagine Swansea will be absolutely peppering Meslier's goal. So I'm afraid is probably going to be another fairly slow affair. I guess the benefit for Leeds is there should be a bit more opportunity to attack, to break, to counter attack. And that's exciting. When you guys talk about Farke, and I share a lot of your views on his style of play and some of the things that I criticised, particularly at the end of last season and in that playoff campaign. I'm a bit torn because I find it impossible to fully criticise someone that has put together a team that is this dominant in statistical terms, especially without Ampadu and Somerville and Ruter. I think he has to take a lot of credit. But, last season, Leeds' most, the thing that was most exciting were the goals that Somerville scored at Norwich, or the goals that started with Ruter, like a young gazelle galloping into space and carrying it forward and playing through balls to the wingers or whoever. Attacking on the break is exciting. It's more exciting than, slow death by constriction and suffocation. So on that front, you might have a few opportunities to stretch your legs against a Swans team that will look to build like you do through the thirds and give you a bit of space on the break.
The main thing I remember about Swansea last year was they played a catastrophically high line, which
I've just written down the word Swansea high line on my piece of paper.
We just kept knocking the ball over the top and getting behind over and over again.
It's like, why don't they stop doing this? It's just playing to our...
It was great. I mean, I very much enjoyed it because it was just gifting us chance after chance, and a lot of space for Nonto and James and our quick players to run into.
Yeah.
It'd be a game for... I'd be really surprised if Joseph doesn't start ahead of Perrault. And at least in the number 9 spot. Obviously, Perrault can play in that 10 role as a more withdrawn striker. But for that exact reason, Swansea's high line, surely it's got to be Joseph offering a bit more of a threat in behind.
You do wonder, don't you? He doesn't seem to have fully settled on who he wants in which game just yet. But yeah, I do hope they give us space to play in, because the teams that have done that it has made the games more entertaining, not just sitting in and camping in on the edge of your area. But it is a dangerous game to play against this team, I think.
Yeah, we've got... I mean, for years we were in the Championship with an incredibly slow team. We all remember the midfield of Michael Brown, Michael Tong, Luke Varney, Paul Green. There was zero pace in our team. Steve Morrison up front. Whereas now we've got 3 or 4 of the quickest players in the division when everyone's fit. So we shouldn't complain.
Dan James against the high line.
Are you guys enjoying dribbly Joe Rothwell in midfield? I remember talking about him during the transfer window chat that we had, and I was like, he is pretty unusual in terms of Championship midfielders. He just absolutely loves just dribbling really, really, really quickly through the middle of the pitch. Have you guys started to see that?
Yeah, he picks it up and runs with it, doesn't he? He darts to the edge of the box, but it's one of those things that was possibly lacking from the control of Gruev and Ampadu actually losing them and being forced into playing Rothwell and Tanaka has probably made us more attacking and more progressive, I would argue. Because one of the things that we never seemed to do was try and get through the lines quick enough. And Rothwell picks it up and just drives to the box. And there's a lot to be said, I think, in this division for just getting people running back towards their own goal, which is why I like Dan James, and I think he's really, really effective at this level. Just get people on the back foot. There's a lot to be said for it.
Yeah, and Tanaka as well is good at receiving the ball on a turn and getting play going, whereas last year we had Glenn Kamara, who is very effective at what he does, but it was very, very sideways and backwards. Like very rarely lost the ball. But there were games when you were losing and he just was knocking it to the centre backs, and you're like, come on, you've got space in front of you. Just turn and run with it for a little bit. So yeah, I think overall we're actually fairly pleased with it.
Yeah, I think another thing that I think I've noticed, and I'd like you to corroborate, is like having Bogle at right back. He's never going to be Archie Gray, the starlet. But I think just in terms of the types of player that they are and their sort of natural tendencies, like he wants to be an attacker and he wants to join the front line basically as quickly as possible. Whereas Gray is more of a midfielder, right? He wants to be in possession of the ball and be the one to kind of build attacks, and clearly had an unbelievable campaign. But I think like you watch Leeds now compared to last season, it's much like you basically attack with like 6 in the front line because you got the 2 most attacking fullbacks in the division, I think, with Firpo and with Bogle. You've got obviously the striker and then the 3 behind, and Rothwell as well, who provides, as you've said, a much more of a thrust than you had last season in terms of Kamara and Gruev and even with Ampadu. So in that sense, I do think there's been development in an attacking sense. It is a more aggressively attacking team, I think, than last season. I don't necessarily know whether that is playing out in terms of how it looks, but in sort of tactical terms and player profile terms, like a lot of the new names are more like attack minded than their predecessors.
Yeah, getting it through the lines for me was always one of the problems in Farkas football, but like Tanaka and Rothwell both seem to be capable in getting it on the half turn. That's one of the things that I think we lacked.
The emphasis was on Ruta last year. If he didn't provide that, it felt like we hit a brick wall. So now we've got having a couple of players who are able to turn these things.
Do you think we're a more effective unit? I think even if we've lost some of the flair in terms of the overall machine, I think is possibly better and less reliant on individuals.
You'd think so, and the points total reflects it as well versus this point of last season as well. And I know we had to deal with difficulties at the start of last season around Nonso and Sinisterre and players still going out and the team still settling, but we have exceeded the points totals, and we're not. And in terms of how close we are to the top, I know we're not there yet, but we're very much within touching distance of it. Whereas at this point last year, there was a fair old gap had opened up.
Yeah, it was interesting without that Watford game, just returning to that, because they attacked us a little bit, and they got Junior Firpo, I think, running back towards his own goal once or twice, and you saw some of the fun Firpo aspects when he's trying to defend. And I think the way that we play now with the fullback so high in attacking probably suits both of them. Because we've seen some shaky moments from Bogle occasionally going back towards his own goal, albeit when he first signed, he seems to have settled down a little bit now. But yeah, I think the style suits the fullbacks, suits the midfielders. So I think everything's fine.
I was looking at the odds. The odds suggest we have an 80% chance of promotion,
right? Which
seems far too high. I'm not at all on board with it. But that if you want to bet on us, that's what you're betting on.
I'm fairly sure when Ali came on last time, he said it was 100% chance.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Something like that. Yeah. Also, for my own benefit, can I ask you guys about Strauch at the back? Because from my perspective, again, just in terms of someone who didn't play quite as much last season, he looks like he's come in, looks pretty quality on the ball, which probably helps, with some of the deeper build-up stuff that your Gruevs and your Archie Greys were helping with last season, but now you've got more attacking options in there. And he's developed a lot, I think, physically and defensively, maybe since his early days in the Leeds team, where I know that side of his game was being questioned, albeit at a higher level, at Premier League level, where he could still be exposed if you're there next season. But to me, he just looks far too good to be playing in the Champ, and another very effective piece of this team.
A towering Adonis.
Okay, I was going to go Rolls Royce. We're going to go dropping some cliches. Very handsome too is the other thing. But yeah, the other thing with him is he's essentially our only threat from set pieces, because for how good he is in the air defensively, Joe Rodon in the opposition box is disastrous.
It's
He's never near anything. If it does get to him,
it goes backwards.
He goes backwards. It goes over.
He's often the opposition's best defender as well as ours.
It's bizarre how terrible he is in an attacking sense for someone who's so clearly so good in the air. But no, Strauch is actually he seems to instinctively know where to be, doesn't he? Which is, I guess, you probably can teach it, but we have been unable to teach it.
Yeah, I'm happy with him. It'll be interesting to see what happens if and when we make the step up, but I think we just need to make the step up first before we start worrying about that.
I'm not in the top 3 yet, lads, okay? I just want to keep reminding you that. You've still got work to do.
You've told us we're going to be, so I believe you.
We are third, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, we are third.
Yeah, third on 29 points, and you've got Sheffield United and Sunderland both on 31.
Morally top.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
basically just becoming like a professional devil's advocate / therapist for you guys, where when you thought that Leeds weren't very good, me and George come on to say you're amazing. And when you think you're too good and it's too easy, I come on and tell you like, nah, come on, don't be like that.
The historical
you can add your own jeopardy, and you need to.
I was going to say the historical context of this football club, though, is ridiculous. In my lifetime, I think my first ever season going was watching us drop out of it as a kid. So I don't remember it, but I was watching us drop out of the top flight at the start of the 80s. And then it took us 8 years to get promoted, which felt like an age then. Then within 2 years, we'd won the league. Within 10 years, we were in the Champions League semi-final. A few years after that, we got relegated again and then down into League One. So we've been through a lot, I think it's fair to say. So it's really hard to know where to set your expectations. And then you've got like Bielsa who comes along to essentially save you from yourselves some 15 or 16 years after you've come out of the top flight with this maverick, entertaining purists football and his humanism as well that underpins it all. Such a unique individual. Kind of reframes everything you ever knew about football, and you start to view it in a different way. And it was Bielsa actually who said, I'm paraphrasing, but football it's entertainment for the masses, isn't it? It's for people to enjoy it. And I think when it gets to be a bit of a grind, just as it has been in recent weeks, whether that is lack of jeopardy or whatever it might be, all those combination of factors we discussed, you kind of go, oh, he was right. He was right all along. So yeah, it's been a ride, Ali. It's been a ride.
Yeah. I mean, he makes it difficult for other managers, right? Because he's basically a Jesus-like figure for Leeds United. And, I really miss him as well. He was, that Leeds team is one of my favorite that we've covered on the pod. So I've got no argument about Bielsa kind of ruining things for everyone else. I also think that, it's interesting that quote about football being entertainment. It is, of course it is. It's all of our favorite thing, right? It's the reason why you guys do what you do. It's the reason I do what I do. It's the reason why it's the most popular sport in the world. Like, I do think there's, and I'm not qualified to have like philosophical discussions, sadly, but I just find it really interesting that this thing, football, which is a game, which is different to, it's obviously an industry and a business and whatever, and it creates jobs for us and for so many others. But in essence, it's a game. It's not serious real life, and that's why we love it. But then because we're all so obsessed with it, and there's so much of it, and there's so much coverage these days maybe, and the nature of being a modern football fan is so different to how it was even 20, 30 years ago and beyond, means that people do seem quite miserable all the time about football, which to me, maybe I'm just simple-minded. I can't get on board with allowing yourself to be really down in the dumps about something that should be your escape, that should be your favorite part of the week, that should be the thing that you talk about because you want to talk about something that isn't life and responsibility and things that are really difficult. That's what I find really difficult. And I think with Bielsa's quote about entertainment is impossible to argue with. But then I also have this thing at the moment where I want to remind people that football isn't a TV show, right? You talk about another lap around the track. That's what football is. It's just multiple laps around the track. You can depend on it. It's the infinite game. It's a constant. And for every club, there are massive ups and downs over a long period. It's not a TV show. And increasingly it feels like that's what people in suits want it to be. And I think I worry about the impact that's having on even your match going fans. Like, I think it's been packaged up as such a TV show that there's an expectation that we have to be, entertained every single game. And I don't know if that's what football's ever necessarily been, right? Like you can't manufacture drama for every team, every season, every weekend. The sport itself is an amazing vehicle for competition and therefore for drama, for interesting stories and sporting interest. But it can't be that every single minute of every single game for every team, every weekend, every season. Does that make sense of it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you spend basically years being miserable as a football fan, and every now and then punctuated by something brilliant and amazing.
And also sometimes even in the terrible seasons, you get an odd game, which something insane happens. You'll come back from 3-0 down in half an hour, and it'll have an impact on you. You'll be like, God, that's why I go. Like that is, even if it's only once this season, that game is why I've gone to all the others.
Yeah. I feel alive. When you,
That's it, isn't it?
I completely agree.
And if that happened every week, then it wouldn't hit the same. It wouldn't feel the same. You'd be, it's like if you just only watch gory horror films, after a year or two, you're not going to feel the same way when the gory stuff and the scary stuff happens. You're desensitized to it. So you don't want it to be like that every week, because it wouldn't feel as special when it does happen. I want to ask the viewers, if anyone's got to this point and got through my drivel. I went to a Leeds game when you were in League One, must have been, at Cheltenham Town. I off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what season it was. I can't even tell you what the score was. What I can tell you is I was with some Leeds fans in the home end, which I imagine happened quite a lot during this period. And Leeds had a goal disallowed. It was probably Trezor Candle, born offside or something. And a lot of Leeds fans gave themselves away in the home end. And there were a lot of angry West Country people about that situation. But also the Cheltenham crowd didn't have enough about them to make a real issue of it, which you probably had at other grounds. So yeah, was anyone else at that game? If so, what happened? I'd like to be reminded.
I definitely did go to Cheltenham.
That was the before times. I refused to acknowledge it.
I will say it's a long train to Cheltenham.
Yeah.
So my memory of it may be somewhat hazy from that, but I'm pretty sure we won the time I went. I think Becchio scored.
Right.
I think it was 1-0. Darren Kenton played. That's weirdly something that stuck in my head. It was one of his few games.
Just back to the theme there. It's about that shared experience. There was a lot of fun to be had on that tour of League One, even though we simultaneously hated it as well, because we thought this is ridiculous. Ken Bates has taken us down here. There was fun to be had. I think just returning us to the recent weeks, it's the lack of danger, be it existential terror or ambition and fun at the other end. It's just somewhere in the middle. It's the opposite Goldilocks point, I suppose, isn't it? We just in recent weeks just found ourselves in a point where you go, oh, come on, just something happen. Just something happen. Just some drama. Just feed the junkie in me. But I think we all know, don't we, that underneath it all, we're probably all right, relative to this season and the other people in this division. I think I feel fine, but I think the feeling a bit fine and a bit bored at the weekend against QPR. It's just we've been caught in a. Yeah, you're right as well. Millwall was a factor, Michael. I think so. It's just a little sequence of results and events that just made everyone just a bit indifferent in the short term.
I think as well, a defeat at Millwall plays into some of your worst fears as a Leeds fan as well. You go, yeah, I can see we're really good. We're probably the better than everyone else in this league in terms of the players we've got, but we'll still lose to Millwall because we always do. Even though we didn't last year. Yeah. It's like a weird...
we ignore that.
And a weird ingrained... Yeah, it's purely just going to back up my argument here. It's like, well, of course we lose to Millwall. They've got Neil Harris in charge now. Of course we're going to lose to them. Yeah. And it's like, well, and I guess that falls back into the stereotypes of, even though we should do this, of course we'll mess it up.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the worst of both worlds within that.
But then we hear it in the clips on propaganda. Like when we were listening to a game, I can't remember which teams it was, but one of the teams was 1-0 down. And you could hear fans in the crowd going, 2-0, 2-0, like talking the next goal in. And it didn't go in, did it? Yeah. It was a separate incident. So you tell yourself these little stories, don't you? And it happens to all of us. And it's a madness, but what a madness it is. It's great fun, really. I think so.
I think the game you were looking for, by the way, it was Dennis Wise in charge, and we lost. We lost 1-0. It was a late Jermaine Beckford goal that was disallowed for offside.
Right, okay. Sorry, Trez or Kandal. I'd like to make a formal apology.
What year was that?
It was 2007. That'll have been, if it was wise. First season down, won't it have been the -15 year?
Right. Yeah.
Great times.
Remind you that we're all right now. Ali, thanks for coming on. We'll do it again soon. And you can come back. Probably the next international break is the other side of Christmas. So presumably we will be running away with the league by then because you told us we would.
Maybe. Yeah. Still work to be done. That's my line this time. Still work to be done.
Where can people find you?
We are Not the Top 20, all pod platforms, YouTube as well. And if you're interested in the England senior men's national team, we are the England pod as well. And we're covering the international break too.
Thank you very much. We'll catch up soon. Yeah. See you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
The Square Ball Podcast.